Konnichiwa. As this video's title suggests, this is going to be on the growing trend of virginity and potential inceldom in Japan, both amongst men and women. So in just a minute, we're going to get into that. Before I do, I wanted to just quickly comment on the last incel video I made, which was called Why I Empathize with Incels but Not with Their Ideas, which I was actually very surprised and honestly very humbled and touched by the comments that I got on that. Um, you know, I had made that video honestly to criticize some of the red pill, black pill ideas of incels, not because I hate incels, but because I'm a liberal atheist and I'm kind of at war with the religious right in my life. So I felt it would be hypocritical to just instantly go and endorse those same ideas. Well, maybe not the exact same ideas, but a repackaged version of those ideas that incels or anyone that has red pill, black pill ideas have. So that's kind of why I made it. I felt like I almost kind of had to. But I was then expecting there would be a lot of hate in the comments and just a lot of people really mad. But I was really surprised. Most of the incels that put disagreements up, they were very mild and very respectful disagreements. And others just put up their agreements that, like, hey, I'm an incel, but I, don't agree with all red pill, black pill ideas, and I don't hate women. I'm not misogynistic or anything. So I agree with you on that. And it was really quite, inspiring when I read some of that. So before I get into the main part of this video, I just wanted to quickly thank those who commented on that. And, it just really did kind of surprise me. So without any further ado, now that I'll get into the main part of the video. I was recently watching a video called Love, Sex, and Marriage in Japan, to which I attached the link here. It's on Amazon, and if you have Amazon Prime, you can watch it for free. But it addresses the growing tendency in Japan of both men and women to be virgins until much later ages than normal. I believe it was between age 18 to 36 in Japan, 44% of women and 42.4% of men are now virgins. And also, of course, single as well in Japan, which is truly stunning because if you go into the US and most other countries, that number is going to be down to single digit percentages. I believe in the US, under the age of 30, it's like 12%. And as a 31-year-old virgin, I can relate to that. I know there aren't that many virgins here in the US or people who haven't had any relationships at all. So I kind of, can empathize, which is kind of why I empathize a little bit with incels. But the interesting thing also about this, though, is that Japan is in no way like a lot of other first world countries that one would normally expect to have a high rate of virginity amongst men and women in. Japan is the only first world country that ranks incredibly low on its overall gender gap. Most people, even most Japanese people, will admit to you that Japan has an issue with both racism and sexism. And while racism is its own issue, and I'm not going to deal with that here because it doesn't pertain. Sexism in Japan, is very much a problem, not just within relationships, but within, political and economic endeavors as well. I almost did a study abroad trip in Japan when I was in the business college, and we had some corporate executives that were Americans that had worked for Japanese corporations come and talk to us. And one of them mentioned that he'd only met one female corporate executive in all of his decades of working in Japan. And he said that, he just, when he saw her, was kind of in awe because he figured, she must have had to go through so much discrimination to have been in that position. And, so that's, of course, very different than your average European or American company. But in relationships in Japan, women are still heavily pressured to be the child caretakers, and men are heavily pressured to be the breadwinners. And it was clear that watching this documentary, that was a contributing factor to why at least some men and women decided to stay single, particularly some women. A lot of the women in there spoke about how if they got married to a man, they would be expected to instantly give up their career for his if they were to have kids. And a lot of women, like one of the women in the show was married herself, actually, which was kind of interesting, I thought. But then on the male side, the guys, they were actually relatively normal and good-looking, decent-looking guys and all, but they were incredibly nerdy. Some of the guys they were interviewing on this, and that's coming from a nerdy guy here. I can't judge too much, but they actually kind of reminded me of myself in that sense because they were like going to a video game arcade bar, and I go to those myself here. And they talked about how none of them had relationships with girls, and they were all virgins. And when asked why, they said, well, none of the girls here in Japan have superpowers, so we only want to date girls with superpowers, which, that's sounds like something you hear a older virgin say. But then also going back to the female side, one thing I noticed, one of the girls on it, they have also rent a boyfriend and like rent a girlfriend services in Japan, which aren't actually male or female escorts. There's no sex involved. It's just like a practice dating session where you can, in this particular instance, the girl was dating a guy that she had hired, who was basically just being a good boyfriend to her for the date. And this girl was so shy, it was literally painful. She could not make eye contact with him the whole time and would look away and just kind of giggle a little bit, which I'm not judging that. I have a lot of problems with shyness myself, but I just couldn't help but just be a little wince a little bit, just kind of watching her in it. But still, it kind of goes to my overall idea of what I think kind of causes inceldom and what kind of is an inhibitor in relationships both in Japan and in the US and everywhere. And that's really social anxieties and kind of problems connecting both. And of course, that builds mostly off my own experiences where I'm getting that from, because I've always had those issues with everything in life. I'm not, a particularly gregarious person with a lot of friends. I don't get out much. I'm kind of a workaholic and a studyaholic. And of course, that's also very common in Japan that people are workaholics and studyaholics. But, um, that's I think, and also what I one time watched in a Psychology in Seattle podcast with Dr. Kirk Honda, who has done a segment on incels, which I'd highly recommend as well, where he said number one trait he observed in all people who identify as incels is problems with social anxieties rather than necessarily problems with looks or money. And I think that's also, common with femcels as well, which of course just stands for female incels. And watching this documentary on Japan and watching it how this kind of affected both men and women equally within the country kind of led me to further, I guess you say, build on that idea that I had, as well as that. And again, I don't mean this to necessarily argue or take issue with incels, but I think that traditionalism and conservative thinking don't necessarily help the problem either. And that may be a little bit of my non-traditional bias, but it's very hard to peg down for certain because Japan is a very interesting and unique country. As a secular person, I find it very interesting how secular Japan is, and yet how they still have so many old traditions and conservative ideas, which is very, very different than your average secular country, which typically there's a strong correlation between liberalism and atheism. And that's just one of many interesting trends. But since but like I said, that's kind of just one thought I wanted to build on in making this video. And, there's a lot of directions you could go with this, so I'm going to stop there because I can't really go a whole lot further without going into great depth and detail. But, if you have any thoughts on this, feel free to like, share, and comment below. And also, just before I close out, again, one last thank you to those who, comment on my last video who are incels or just general commentators. If I had made a similar video of that on the religious right, and I actually had religious people that viewed my channel, I would have gotten lambasted much harder than that. And I guarantee you, in my real life, I get lambasted a lot harder than that by the religious right people here in this country. So I was actually kind of surprised. And again, I just wanted to thank you for that. So thanks for watching and see you next time. Bye.